Brady, I've got lots of questions for you. Quick hitters, don't think, just say it, okay? And we're not going to speculate on any of the answers after I'm done with all these questions. This is just get to know you. People want to know who the heck are you? And afterwards we can delve into the answers. So first of all, how do you say your last name?
It's Finnern.
Oh, no, that's wrong. That's wrong. It's Finnern.
Right. 3 N's. I always say 3 N's, 2 syllables. So a lot of people say Finnern, but Finnern. And some people emphasize the Finnern. It's just Finnern. It's from Schleswig-Holstein of North Germany. And so that's, probably actually here's the scary part. It's actually probably more Danish, but the Finnerns have not admitted that at this point. So anyways, Finnern, 2 syllables, 3 N's.
Okay, speaking of Denmark, should we establish a district of Greenland in the Missouri Synod?
No.
Okay. What's your favorite book of the Bible?
Now, is favorite book of the Bible a trick question, or are you just asking in general?
I'm asking the questions here.
Okay. All right.
Don't think, just speak.
I've tried to be like Terry Madden on issues, etc. Ask the question back and see how it goes.
It's not going to fly here.
Anyways, Hebrews, 100%.
What are you, some kind of Marcionite?
Pretty much.
Okay. Well, although as far as like New Testament books go, that's the Old Testament right there. What's your favorite confessional? What's your favorite confessional document?
Ah, very good. Probably the Small Called. Maybe because I just studied that on Concord Matters, but partly because I love how Luther writes in a way that he knows he's near the end of his life, and he just wants to get it very clear. And he's kind of snarky. He's pretty snarky throughout. You can tell he didn't talk to a whole lot of people before he submitted that sucker. So that's why I enjoy Small Called. So.
That's great. The answer I was actually looking for was a brief statement on the doctrinal position of the Missouri Synod by Francis Pieper.
That's right. We do confess to that. Yeah.
Which is not a brief
in your nation. Yeah.
Which is not a brief title. What's your favorite divine service setting in Lutheran service book?
No, come on now. That's not even fair. Well, I will say this, so I started a ministry, and LSB came out the first year that I was in ministry. And so I had an organist at St. John's in North Prairie, and he went to Eastman School of Music. And so we started, and we almost did explicitly divine service setting for 2 years. And he just had a way of playing it that was absolutely outstanding. And so that probably where I tend to, if I'm going to choose one just to do one, I do that one. But
I don't think I've ever done DS4.
There it is. See, you haven't. Yeah. Well, you haven't ever had an Eastman organist as your organist to start. No,
I haven't lived.
You haven't lived yet. No, it's kidding. But that was just probably because it was newer. And to be honest, Divine Service Setting 3, I didn't grow up with. Like I was born in 1979, and I had the blue hymnal my whole life, and so I was kind of used to 1, and 4 was new. And now, I'd probably do more 3. But 4 is the one. If you were to ask me which one do you want to do today, I'd do 4.
I was actually looking for 2, which you didn't mention at all.
Yeah, as if it was not even in the hymnal.
Is that in there? I don't know that one. Yeah, right.
So musically, I think objectively, 2 is actually the prettiest.
2?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the feast of victory for our God. Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Okay, what's your favorite alternate route to the ministry?
This is a
wow. This is every time.
all visitors.
Well, I'll say that we've been very blessed with alternate route guys who go 2 years of seminary, take Greek, go on their vicarage, and they're sent out. So I'll say that.
I was looking for Delto. Next question: what's your favorite synod acronym?
Oh, very good. Well, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't remember it, but it's a Blue Ribbon Task Force. That was my favorite one, but I never memorized that acronym from the 2010 convention. Do you guys have that memorized? I don't have that acronym memorized. Blue Ribbon Task Force. I can't remember what it was. So if anybody who listens to this and want to remind us if they have it memorized, do that. Yeah.
I was in high school And the synodical convention was the furthest thing from my mind.
Thankfully. Can you imagine? Little Joshua Reber watching convention in high school. That would be a sight to see.
Although I do go back and frequently watch the YouTube video of when Matt Harrison won, and just the shock you could feel. Our church politics are fun, aren't they?
It was quite the situation, because I remember I had just taken a call to Sartell. And so I was literally like 2 weeks in to my call there. And there I was, like, with this 1999 laptop that barely worked. But for some reason that day it worked at that exact time that he was elected. It just happened to work that day. So, yeah, I remember that very well. But I can't remember the acronym. I know it's Blue Ribbon Task Force, and we always make fun of it, that it was a task force that had to be called Blue Ribbon in order for it to be justified. So that's what I have right now. How about you guys? How about you, Josh? Do you have an acronym you like in the Senate?
Yeah, LWML, which clearly stands for Lutheran Women in Mission.
True. Yeah, it's exact wording, exact letters.
And I'm not just picking on the girls. I think limos.
Oh yeah, limos. Yeah.
Oh, it's lamos actually.
If you have Dr. Hardy on, he'll say limos.
Okay.
Yeah. So look forward to that.
Can you make that connection for us? We're trying to expand, and we need networking capabilities here.
I'll get you his. I'll get you his text. I'll get you his text.
Perfect.
You'll be on. You just have to ask about wrestling, and then you say, "Hey, we want to talk about wrestling." He'll be on. So,
bro, I challenged him to a wrestling match on the Synod Stories podcast, and I haven't heard anything. So
yeah. Well,
what's your favorite non-geographical district of the Missouri Synod?
We only have 2. Correct? Am I right on my numbers there? I don't know. English is bigger, so I'll say English. How about that?
Wow, that's a bold political statement. What do you call the body of water by Texas, Louisiana, and Florida?
Oh, the Gulf.
You are a preeminent diplomat here. This is really good, Brady. I'm impressed.
Well, we were at our family went to Sarasota, and that was kind of the joke every day. Like, what Gulf is this again? And so we just kept saying Gulf, and we just stopped there. So that has to do. My kids were more diplomatic than me. How about that?
I was in Florida, by the way. I was in Florida the day that it changed to the Gulf of America, and I was on the beach, and nobody else was there because it was 65 degrees. So I think I was the first person to swim in the Gulf of America.
Write that down. Right, make a plaque.
I did. Yeah, it's going to go on my tombstone.
How many members ideally would be in one congregation?
Oh my. You know what? Here's a funny story with that. So when I was at seminary, one time, Joel Bierman said in class, you should never have a church with more than 300 confirmed members, is what he said. If it gets more to that, then you don't know their name and you need to move on. So I was like, oh, I remember that part. Like, at seminary, there's so much I forget, but that one I remember. And so that was second year. And then fourth year, I come back and we're in this class with him again, and he said something like along those same lines of a question. I was like, yes, I remember this. So I said 300 members. He asked a similar question, and he goes, why is that, Brady? And I go, because I think that's what you want me to say. So he's like, what? I was like, you said that 2 years ago. It was, oh, I remember that. So anyway, so much for I remember that. But it's one of those realities. I don't have a strong opinion on it, but I will say I'll use a Eugene Peterson quote. He interviewed with Doxology before he passed, and his quote was, if the pastor can't remember everyone's name, then you're too many members. And so I always remember that.
Can I ask a question about that? This is I don't want to interrupt your train of thought there, Josh, on your stream of questions, but this one's interesting because there's the kind of practical, like, people obviously stick better when you remember their name. Like, they know that. Every pastor has had this experience. When somebody comes back for the second time and you remember who they were when they visited the time before, it makes all the difference in the world. So there's this kind of like practical, persuasive, you gain credibility when you remember people's names, when you know their names. But is there also an element of something that inheres in the nature of the pastoral task, that you can't actually be a shepherd to sheep that you do not know, or a physician to patients that you have not misdiagnosed. Do you think that that's something that's unique to the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, or maybe even just a segment of the Missouri Synod's view of the doctrine of the ministry, or is that inherent in like the scriptural doctrine of the ministry? What do you think? Either one of you.
Well, I think you asked Josh. I think you need to hear from him. He asked the question.
I was looking for 120 or 153 or 318.
Biblical numbers.
I know.
but yes, because our vocation of the ministry as it is, I mean, the answer is yes. Like, what does pastoral care look like? So, like, we are preachers first and primarily, right? Getting the word out there. But if we're going to care for a flock, I mean, it's patterned after John 10, right? The shepherd knows the name of the sheep. So,
I mean, that I agree. It has to do, to me, it has to do with our understanding of being a Seelsorger. You're being a Seelsorger and caretaker of souls. Well, you got to at least know their name. And so I don't know what that all looks like. I've met pastors who can know an immense amount of names, and pretty incredible. And so maybe it's a little bit different for everyone. Of course, we don't want the size of the church only to depend upon the pastor and his ability to remember names, but I think it's just a good template for us to consider how we operate as the body of Christ. So I can't give an exact number, but I'm sure people will listen in and give us a number. How about that?
Probably not.
No, probably not. Now I'm a little worried now that I said. Go ahead.
You said people, but we've got about 2 listeners. So.
Oh, there it is. Well, I'm excited for this. I'm most worried about my answer so far with Wally Vanaskis of the SELC. He might be mad at me now at the next meeting. So just, Wally, if you're listening, I apologize, but verifiable fact, English is bigger. So that's all I base it on. So there it is.
Well, you chair the meetings, right?
True.
Yeah, just tell him he's out of order.
Step down, son. Oh wait, no, that's not in Robert's rules. Yeah, that's not Robert's rules.
So your favorite book of the Bible, Hebrews, did Paul write it?
Well, we don't know. I'm assuming he did, but we don't know.
Okay, great. You want to know my take on that?
Sure.
Well, thank you for flattering me.
You're
That's
gonna
nice.
know. You're gonna know.
So it's kind of like this whole thing, like which gospel was first. We don't know for sure, and it doesn't matter. But the methodology of determining it actually does matter. So you can't say that Mark was first because it's the most simplistic. Because what you're doing there is you're saying that it's not the word of God. So everybody who says that Mark's the first, starting in the 19th century, or they're trying to undermine the Bible. So the same thing is true with Hebrews and Pauline authorship. They're assuming it's a man-written document, and that's all it is. And so they look at the words and the structure, and they say, well, the same guy possibly couldn't have written it. And it's just stupid because it's dishonest, because look at a sermon you wrote 15 years ago versus today, and then look at your favorite artist, Taylor Swift, country star, and now what kind of music is she producing?
Right.
Same exact person.
Very good. Yeah. And all you listeners can tell that Pastor Reber just puts you in a corner and you can't get out of it because he doesn't stop and let you say no. He just says that's what it is. And so
I'll let you say no to this next one, Lutefisk.
No. What amazes me is how many German congregations have lutefisk suppers. It's just shocking to me. Like, I've met at least 3 in our district who have lutefisk suppers. And that makes no sense. I mean,
it's a nice effort at ecumenism, really. I mean,
it's got to be what it
is. Scandinavian neighbors. It's, I mean, the only kind of fellowship that can cross those borders.
Now, do you know the town, the lutefisk capital of America? You know what town that is?
Isn't it?
I saw it on the news because
it's in Minnesota. It's in our district. I know.
Yeah, this guy ate like 12 pounds of lutefisk each year. I saw it.
It's really bad.
It's a small town. What is it?
It's Madison, Minnesota. You bet. That's then my grandmother was full-blooded Norwegian, and she had family. She grew up in that area, so that was always the big thing, is to go to Madison for lutefisk. Anyways, but yeah, we have a German church there. I don't think they have a lutefisk supper because everyone knows that the Norwegian church would do it better. So yeah, there you go. Now you know that.
Great. Last question. Is it true that you have the capital of Egypt tattooed on your arm?
No, I do not.
Okay.
I have Jesus. I have Jesus, on my baptismal birthday, but not the capital of Egypt. Why? Tell me more. That's an interesting question. How did you come up with that one?
Well, what's the name of the symbol you have tattooed on your arm?
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. Fair
That's
enough.
how
Josh is, I
that's
think
how I
too
teach the
clever by
confirmation
half
kids.
is the, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Hey, next question. You ready to talk about Genesis 45?
I think that's what we're supposed to talk about here. Yeah.
This is our podcast. It's our rules, so there's no supposed to talk about.
Well, that's what you told me. So it is your podcast. This is what you told me. I was not prepared for the tattoo one, so there it is.
Yeah.
Well, you want
right.
to take us away, because I know you prepped for this.
I did.
What? So here's a good question. If you had to preach on this, let's say you're doing, I don't know, when you would preach on an entire chapter, like a special midweek service or something like that. What would you try to draw out?
So the first, this was a lot of fun to dig into this part of Genesis, to look at the various moving parts. I'll just start with a few ramblings. Is first of all that it's like what I would consider to be a good movie, kind of it's like if you were to have an M. Night Shyamalan movie, it would be, you would see from the brother's perspective. And this is the moment where M. Night Shyamalan finally gets like, oh my gosh, I couldn't believe it this whole time, because we have the perspective of seeing it from Joseph's perspective, but an M. Night Shyamalan movie would come from the brother's perspective, where they're kind of like, something is off, something's not quite right. We're going to find out what happens. So you have the back and forth. You have the question of, why does Benjamin get more food than his brothers? You have the question marks of what's this putting extra, cup in this and money in this, and Jacob trying to struggle with trying to make sure his family's provided for. Judah going from the guy who says, let's sell our brother, to the point where he says, I will sacrifice myself for my brother, and so you have this kind of Christ figure in this. So all of this comes together, and it's a tapestry of opportunity to preach. So I was very, very blessed to be able to travel on that and to study all of this. And we get to hear, I think my first thought, and as I was thinking of how would I preach this, is when he says, I am Joseph, I'm reminded of two parts of scripture. The first one is when Jesus reveals himself to the disciples after the resurrection, and he says, peace be with you. And they're just like, whoa, what's going on? And then he has to say it again. And so that's what happened here, is he had to say it twice. I am Joseph, and he had to say it twice. And so I think about that connection of maybe in the forgiveness piece of it, obviously opposite the keys kind of language, looking to Jesus, but also I am Joseph, and then pointing to Christ with all the I am statements of Jesus too. Turning back to Genesis chapter 3, and it just shows this proclamation of how God was working among his people. And he goes on to catechetically teach on how you did not send me, God sent me. And then at the very end, somehow I'll bring this in, is when Jacob says, it is enough. So kind of that fullness of this, the story coming together to be able to say, it is enough that I'm able to see my son. And maybe a song of Simeon kind of, Lord, now let your servant depart in peace kind of language, holding salvation in his hands kind of. To me, this is, if I had a whole chapter to preach on this one, this might be a whole Lenten series or something. I don't know. So those are my first thoughts, quite a few thoughts. I don't know how long your guests usually talk, but it's just so much there. It's been a lot of fun.
Hey, so there's a chiasm that takes place early in 45, the center of which is verse 9, hurry and go to Egypt, or go up to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not tarry. So the center of that segment of the narrative is the proclamation to Joseph's father that Joseph is still alive, which to me connects it directly to what you described in Jesus' resurrection appearance. I think this is a resurrection appearance. And then the good
Mm-hmm.
news gets proclaimed so that even Jacob, who's as good as dead, is raised back to life by the gospel that comes to him.
Mm.
Well, so I just want to read this typologically as Matthew 28 fulfilling the whole thing, because you see so many connections in that resurrection appearance. So
Yes.
you're absolutely right. And Matthew's at great pains to point this out from the very beginning of his gospel. So if you read Matthew's genealogy and then Luke's, you'll notice, well, the names are a little bit different. And David, we're going to talk about Matthew next after we finish Genesis, right? Did you take my
Yep, that's right.
my suggestion to heart? Okay, good. So we can talk about why the differences. But in Matthew's genealogy, do you remember who Joseph's dad's name is?
Jacob, right?
That's right. So you got Jacob and then Joseph. So a new Jacob and Joseph, and then Jesus coming from that. And then the connections between Old Testament Joseph and New Testament Joseph in Matthew 1 are striking, right? The flight to Egypt, all of that stuff, the dreams that Joseph has. And then you fast forward to Matthew 28, you have a new Joseph of Arimathea, who provides the tomb. And then my favorite thing is what Jesus tells the women: go tell my brothers. And there's 11 of them, right? So this is Joseph speaking to his brothers, and psychologically they got to be torn, because like, who's the last person they want to see? Joseph, right? And Jesus is the last person that the disciples want to see, in a sense, because that means everything he said was true. Oh no, this guy is like a horror movie because he just keeps coming back and there's nothing we can do to stop him. On the same hand, it's like, who's the first person each set of brothers wanted to see? Joseph and Jesus.
Which is exactly what Joseph carries them forward to, and Jesus does as well. Joseph says right away, he's like, look, there are 5 more years of famine. So you need to be close to me now, because just leave all of that stuff aside. We're moving forward. We're going through a wilderness period, and you need to stay close to me.
And they have a hard time believing it, right? Joseph's brothers do. And then I'd never know what to do with this. It's crazy, because in Matthew 28, he's bringing them up the mountain for the Great Commission. And it says some worshipped him, but some still doubted.
Yeah. And it goes into, obviously, John as well, that you have Thomas who doubted. And so you have such a wonderful connection that you're making. And David, the hurry up and go resurrection connection, I guess I had never really thought all of the connections of the resurrection as you guys speak to this, let alone the Great Commission. We're kind of in that era where you go from, like, Lucas Woodford talked about the Great Commission or Great Confusion. So and he wrote about this, and then talked about how in one of our conventions that someone said you have to have the Great Commission in every single resolution. So if you're gonna, like, we need to raise more money, and then you will bring in there, and I mean, just change a bylaw, it has to have the Great Commission in it. So there's a tendency for us to just not talk about it. So that's not helpful, because it's in the Bible, right? And so we have to remember that. But it's very helpful to make that connection of well, everything is crystal clear here, but yet people doubt. And so, well, you keep preaching. So anyways,
how mad would you be if after every circuit resolution I ever wrote, we had to sing all 15 stanzas of From Heaven Above to Earth I Come?
Boy, would it pass? I mean, would it pass? Would it get that resolution?
It would.
Maybe 2 times. And then after that, it depends on how mad the convention is at the chair.
Very true. Very true.
Josh, back to your question about, like, what do you do with the fact that some didn't believe? I'm looking for that here, because doesn't it say somewhere that they disbelieved for joy? Is that in John? And I wonder if that shades it, right? So you can imagine Joseph's brothers reeling and not being able to believe it, because in fact it was the absolute relief of everything that they had been suffering for this entire time.
So that's in Luke 24.
Okay.
So this is when he appears to them and asks, he's like, "Hey bros, you got any fish?"
Right.
So this is great. So we've made connections with with three of the gospels. The connection to Mark then has to be was it verse 8, the original ending, right? The women go away and they said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. So there is this kind of fear, disbelief, and it's not clear if it's from joy, because that's clearly the case in Luke 24.
Yeah. This makes me think about the role of Pharaoh in Genesis 45, who I think you could typify as the father, the heavenly father here. So he's like, when he hears that Joseph's brothers have arrived and that they're reconciled, Pharaoh is so pleased. And then he says to Joseph, go and take care of all of this. In fact, he issues the command. He's like, just so we're clear, you have to go and gather your family.
Well, okay. Actually, let's make a better connection, because verse 8, Joseph says that God has made me a father to Pharaoh.
Okay.
So is is Pharaoh the paraclete? He's the agent being sent to make this happen.
Man,
That's
it's something. There's something there.
Interesting. Wow. And what I'm perspective that I'm really trying to wrestle with quite a bit is the brothers and their response. I was reading something where they said dismayed would be fear of vengeance. And that once again goes to when the disciples were afraid when Jesus appeared, where he could have easily said, hey, you guys messed up here. Here I am resurrected and you guys didn't do anything, but he didn't do that. And the same thing happened here where I'm Joseph. Is my father still alive? That's his first words, and the brothers are just completely dismayed. So I think about instantly their memory, because they have this guilt in the previous chapters. They have this guilt of, I told you we shouldn't have done that to our brother. They were saying there's this immense amount of guilt. And you've ever had that moment as a pastor where you'll talk to someone about something and they will fill in the empty spaces with where they know they messed up. Like I was talking to someone at one point, and I brought up something that was completely unrelated, and they brought up 8 different things of what it could be, which all was an implication on them. When the reality is I was asking about something else, but they went down a list of eight memories I have of the mistakes they made. So the law hits them. They know they're guilty. They know that they're at fault in all of this. And Joseph, like you said previous, didn't have time for that. He's like, listen, all right, here I am. God's done a good thing here. Let's move forward. And then I don't know about the father paraclete. Now we're talking paraclete and Pharaoh. Think about that. You should write a paper on that, Josh.
Oh, hey, related question. What's your favorite circuit newsletter in the Missouri Synod?
Is there more than one?
There used to be one up in Crookston, but that folded after 4 or 5 issues.
What are you guys up to now?
What are we up to now? Well, we just released January's issue was sermons, and that was partially lazy on my front because I didn't feel like the guys wanted to write anything after Christmas, which is fine. And then for March, we're going to do the theme is Pauline epistles.
So Hebrews is going to be in there?
I was thinking about writing an article about Pauline authorship, actually. But I'm also not tied to it because I also want to write an article about why you should not attend a gay wedding, because I think we just lack clarity on it, and I just want to get it out there, and I've got a lot of thoughts on it, and I think our people are just dying for like good practical theology. Just like tell me what to do and then why.
Absolutely, and that's a good one. I would say 10 years ago, there would have been a common theme of saying you can go as long as you do this, and this for a gay wedding. Now I am very much so convinced that you just can't. You just can't. Like
what has changed?
We've seen the implications of the mindset of kind of loving people into the kingdom. Where people, and we talked about this previous to our recording here, is people are looking for clarity, as Josh has said. They're looking for, you know what, you're right, I don't believe that. So why would I go do that? Why would I buy them a gift for their wedding when I don't believe in that? And people get that in society. I mean, people, like right now in Minnesota, they're like, I'm not going to shop at Target because I heard they're related to ICE in some way. So people understand the distinctions. They understand why Barack Obama never went to a Republican National Convention. They know why. Why? Because they don't believe that. So they understand those distinctions. And I think the reality is that's the most loving thing to do is when you actually hold to your convictions. And because when you don't, people just whatever. And sorry, I can go off on that for a while because it's affected when I was serving at Messiah. A lot of those questions came up, and then also within my own family. It just brings up a lot of questions that people have to have convictions, because if you don't, people you're just wishy-washy, and no one wants to follow that. That's for sure.
Yeah,
My favorite thought
they can
experiment.
see right through it.
My favorite
Josh.
thought experiment is to swap the sin, and this works for a whole bunch of things. It's very, very useful. So would you go? Would you go to your relative's induction into the Ku Klux Klan?
Right.
No, and it seems like an absurd question, but David, isn't that the loving thing to do? You don't support the KKK, right? But you love this person,
right?
Yeah,
you put up a sign that said, "I don't agree with this," but still, you're still walking into that induction service. Yeah.
Right. And in fact, you're not in that case, you're not at all afraid of alienating this person. In fact, you're probably kind of glad if they cut you off, because like, what do you want to do? What do you want to have to do with that kind of person? Right. It all comes so naturally. I was thinking about the impact of language. I've been reflecting on Carl Trueman's book concerning identity. And he points out, first of all, this experiential source of identity that we've all imbibed, as well as the sexualization of everything through the influence of Freud in particular. And that, I think, gets to the point why both the sexual stuff concerning marriage in particular is so prevalent, as well as why those are the thorniest questions. And that's primarily because our language has shifted so dramatically when talking about those things. For instance, I have heard Lutheran Church Missouri Synod folks, pastors, use the term LGBTQ community,
right?
Which is a completely abominable term, because for one thing, it's an abuse of the word community, but it also, in the use of it, it legitimizes something that is vile. That's actually a vice, right? It's intended to legitimize something that's a vice. And so, just like you wouldn't say the racist community, as though this were, there's like some sort of a favorable, oh good, I'm glad they've got a community, right? Not at all, right?
You're exactly right. Yeah, and that is something that would just kind of flow from our tongue, because that's what we'll see on the news. That's what we'll read in articles. They'll speak in that way. And I'll say this too, when I was at Gustavus Adolphus College, that was just beginning to be pushed in the ELCA. This would have been, I took a Lutheran His Legacy class at Gustavus, and I remember we read a book that talked about, sexuality and the gospel, and it talked about exactly that, the gay community, and this is their concern, blah 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 blah, and they said, well, we don't ordain an active or a homosexual in a relationship, da da da. And I remember thinking, this doesn't quite sound right. It's one of the great monitors, I think, for all of us as we become catechized, is that doesn't quite sound right. And I never put my finger on until recently, like you said, is that if we use that language, then we are falling down that same path where we're like, no, we don't believe that though, but we're kind of slowly letting it come into our world, and then no longer is sin. It's just communities that are not living quite in the same place. So I agree. How do we get on this subject? Is that Josh's fault?
Well, you asked me what was going on with our circuit newsletter, and then it and then I mentioned an article, and then it went from there. You should never ever preface something true you're about to say by saying, as a cisgendered white male. because then it just says it says that truth is relative to your person. So we've just absolutely abolished the notion of objective truth.
Well,
and to your point, Josh, about being loving, and this is the thing that actually requires navigation, because on the one hand, we can we're pretty good guardians of true statements, propositionally true statements. But navigating the fallout, the relational fallout, is the thing that people really struggle with. So
Mm-hmm.
somehow you have to learn how to be kind and charitable, even when people are angry at you, when they tell lies about you, when they think that you're hateful. That's all you have to do, right? But that's a tall order, learning how to do that.
But
And
I mean, so we had the Beatitudes yesterday. That's the blessed life. Sorry, Brady. Go on.
no, expand on that. I want to hear more on that.
Blessed are you when others persecute you and revile you and utter all kinds of evil falsely about you on account of my name.
Hey, I got a question about your sermon real quick. You did this point about alliteration, and I was reading it this morning in the Greek because of Memento 7:0. I'm reading through the Greek New Testament in the next 70 days with a buddy of mine. And I read Matthew chapter 5, and you get all those, right? Ptokoi, or whatever. I can't remember all the rest of them. You said them. But what was the point? What's the point of that alliteration? I must have not listened when you got to that part of your sermon.
Yeah, my point was it's beautiful. So even when you're looking at these things that look bad, being poor, mourning, being meek, there's clearly a beautiful poetry that Jesus is making a point. Now, I couldn't expand on it further, but it's interesting that only appears in the first half. So that's only in the first four Beatitudes. And then they do disappear in Beatitudes 5 through 8, which there's kind of this flow in the Beatitudes from this inner thing, right? You're being emptied, being poor in spirit, being hungry, mourning. And then it very much moves to being merciful and being peaceful. So it moves out to the externals of what you're actually doing. And so I think what it means is when you actually live these things out, the alliteration drops, meaning it's not always so pretty when you're living these things out, but that's still the blessed life.
Huh. That's interesting. That's a different angle. I appreciate that. I thought that maybe there was a connection to something onomatopoetic or some, like, what are the Greek words that emphasize that plosive, that bilabial plosive, ptuo, right? For instance, it's like, yeah, I know things I learned in Greek class.
By the way, I got to get this point because Brady said the word Seelsorge earlier. The only German word you're allowed to say in this podcast is Heilsgeschichte. Okay, move on, David.
But I was thinking about how, like a good poet does not, utilizes alliteration in that way to call some, like, imagine, I wish I was a poet or I knew poetry, because I'm sure there are great examples of, like, in the woods on a winter day, there's a crackling noise as the snow under your feet and the trees beside you, and they could produce that, kind of that sound in the consonants that are used in the text. And I wonder if there's something there going on. It's like, because that's such a distinct sound, that p sound, that if it was being repeated in that way, it really would stand out to you.
You were speaking about the words we use, and clearly, and what's the beautiful thing about it as we look at Genesis 45 is to be able to speak, okay, what does the text actually say? And this relates to how we walk together as God's people, where we use language such as, we just have to trust each other. And I was very much so challenged recently. I didn't use those words, but I heard people use those words. And there's a couple of pastors who are like, does the Bible talk that way though? Does it say we have to trust each other? Or do we love each other? Do we forgive one another? Do we love each other as a brother in Christ? That kind of language. And that's very important, because to use some of the language, we're using the worldly language and we're filling it in a worldly sense. But if you say we have to love each other right now, that's a challenge, because now you're like that's a big word that we have to figure out how we're going to use. So that's one of the looking at this text too is, okay, what does the text actually say? Because we can remember the Sunday school session of it. We can kind of go off tracks, but what does the text actually say? And that relates to how we relate to one another too. To use biblical words that actually challenge us to think biblically and to live together as God's people.
That's really good, because the danger, the temptation is always to cut corners. I said this to my new member class recently. I've got a great new member class, just phenomenal. And they were talking about how much they appreciate hearing things that they hadn't heard before. Nobody had told them before. And I was urging them to watch out in case they ever hear me cutting corners, not to stand for it, because it's so easy.
Oh, so
Precisely
easy.
to your point about trust, right? saying, look, you're supposed to trust me is really a shortcut. Like that's cutting the corner. Because that's not what the scripture, and in fact, what that is in some sense a plea for just take what I'm saying without evaluating it critically, right? Which is exactly what you shouldn't do, right? Of course, I would be great if I earned your trust, but it would be proper, just as like the Bereans did, to receive what's being presented to you with a healthy, goodwill-oriented skepticism. It's like, well, I need to test this first.
Yeah, that's good, right? Fear, love, and trust in God above all things. And then I did a word search on trust, and every time in the New Testament, it shows up primarily about trusting in God, but then Jesus uses it to contrast with people who trust in themselves. So it's kind of condemned there. On the same hand, though, there has to be. So I'm thinking of like Reagan's statement, right? Trust but verify, which I think is good worldly wisdom, because there has to be a little bit of brotherly trust among us if we're going to have communion together. So if somebody from Pastor Buchs' congregation is going to come visit me and say, "Hey, I go to Grace in Little Rock. Can I commune today?" I'm going to say yes. And why is that? Well, that's because, and I don't know if trust is the good word, but there's at least a common understanding that I trust that what Pastor Buchs has taught is the same thing that I teach too.
Well, and what that is it's not blind trust. It's not trust before the verification, right? Because the verification is we have all made these open statements of confession, right? So that's the starting place. You wouldn't receive the person from a church that you could not identify because you have no basis for having any trust. But the trust has already begun to be established because of our common confession. So there's something there, right?
Which does point to a trust in the Lord because of the confession of which we have. And so there's, I think it does go back to that. And I understand how people use the language, but it usually it's a diversion tactic. Which trust me, I've done it myself, and so it's been very challenging.
You just
for
did
me
it
to
right
think
there.
about it.
I don't trust
I did
you.
it right there. Trust me as I say that. Yeah, I've done it myself, where you kind of divert because you don't want people to ask the main question. So we have to, like you said, I think it's good to challenge members and everyone. Well, if I'm taking shortcuts, let me know because I want to be clear in what we're focusing on. So.
That's good. Yeah, the whole thing is like when people say that diversion, we have to identify what the key issue is. And I think this is what's really frustrating about the pastoral formation debate. And I don't want to get too parochial in it, but it's not. I don't think it's really about that. It's just shorthand for, because you say you want one kind of pastor. Okay, you mean like somebody who follows the hymnal? Is that what we're really talking about? Because I'm willing to have the conversation, but we're not there yet.
And something that I think is important to ask, and I think everybody wants to ask this question. We get lost when it comes to such subjects. What does the Lord want in a pastor? What does the Lord show us in Scripture about what a under shepherd of the Good Shepherd is to be? And that's something that among many other theological subjects that we discuss, we assume a lot. And we're not actually going back to that question of what does the Lord want in this? And I think everyone wants that. We're just not asking the question, I think, enough. So,
well, it's painfully clear, right? That's the problem. I mean, the Pauline list of qualifications are painfully clear, which is why most often when I hear those kind of preached on, it's like, thank goodness we're all forgiven, which is like, that's not what they're there for, right? Take Joseph as an example here. I mean, this is so great because his brothers come to him and he says, what does he say? Don't be dismayed, right? Let's see, do not be distressed, verse 5. No, it begins better with verse 4. I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt, right? This is like Peter preaching in Acts 2, whom you crucified, right?
Yeah.
I'm your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. He's being honest about it, but it's not vindictive. And in fact, I think that his weeping in verse 2 is because all that he's been doing in testing his brothers has been his alien work. He doesn't want to be doing that. Instead, what he wants to be doing is forgiving their sin, right? So I'm your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. He has to say it plainly. Otherwise, what is there to forgive? And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me here for you to preserve life. And of course, we're going to find out in chapter 50 that although they've heard it and they've seen him and they've received his blessings, they still need to hear it again because it's almost too good to be true, right?
And I found it interesting. I think I know this is very important for as we consider the Christian life now. There was a prayer, and this is in the Lutheran Study Bible, where it tells of Joseph. It speaks basically these words: "Let us pursue Joseph's virtues, humility, wisdom, forgiveness, care of parents and family, and let us not quarrel with our Christian journey, but hold fast to the mercy and doctrine that God has revealed to us." I just found it interesting that they talked about virtue throughout and highlighted virtue in this chapter. Something I guess I wouldn't have really thrown in, but it definitely shows us that humility, that wisdom, and the forgiveness and care for the family as well. That we need to consider ourselves when we are loving our own families, which can be quite testing. We haven't been sold to slavery, but we we are slow to forgive for much smaller sins, to say the least.
Yeah, or to we're tempted to not identify them, right?
Oh, don't
Not be
identify.
painfully clear about them,
Right,
right?
right. That's a very good point. That's a very good point. Um, so I think about that with teaching. I have two kids still at home, and so I was thinking now reading this, I'm like, I want to just read the Joseph story with them again, even though they're in high school. And this is one of the great blessings that I have is that my kids still want to be around me occasionally. And so if I were to say, hey, let's read about Joseph, they might actually listen to me. So I'm kind of excited to speak about it, but speak about it in the virtue sense, obviously with Memento and other wonderful teaching that we have right now. It's a great moment for our young people to hear of that need for virtue.
I'm thinking about like the pattern of church history. So, David, you brought it up. We get the reconciliation here in 45, but they need to be reminded of it in chapter 50. So you get this great pattern, and it's like, oh, everything's good, right? They end up in Egypt. That's happily ever after. Oh, wait, there's more, right? You got the Exodus. And so this is also the pattern after the resurrection of Jesus. It's like everything should be great, right? He ushers in a new creation. But then all of a sudden we got more problems. And I'm always amazed in the book of Acts. It's like, hey, did you guys receive the Holy Spirit? And they're like, we didn't hear there was a Holy Spirit. And the apostles don't like yell at them and be like, what do you mean you never heard that? Like, they're not shocked by it. But this is just how like God works, this slowly development. So when people say like, man, church history is so messy, how do we end up in these cycles where we just like forget the gospel, we forget the word of God? It's like, well, they're already doing that already in the Bible.
Yeah. So do you think, because this has been challenged in conversation before by pastors, do you think that pattern in the Old Testament of the Lord blessed them, provided for them, made a covenant with them, and then they rested on their laurels, and every man did what was right in his own eyes, and so God
Mm.
sent them into trouble, and then sent them saviors? Do you think that pattern holds in the New Testament? And if so, is there any variation, and what would it be? How does it differ in the
Ooh,
New Testament, in the New Covenant?
wow.
Because I think you're right. I think I mean, like, just take the long scale, um, medieval church to the Reformation, right? It was every man doing what was right in his own eyes. Of course, a faithful remnant, always a faithful remnant. But that's an Old Testament term that I think we do rightly apply to the church. There's always a faithful remnant. Um, but does the pattern hold?
I think so. I think Luther's the judge from the Book of Judges,
Yeah.
and certainly a lot of people like him. I think the pattern holds because we still believe in the office of the ministry where God sends these servants, right?
So a related question then would be, the Old Testament does not shy away from recounting those cycles. And I'm thinking about how difficult it is for us to do it with any like proximity to history. So like it's easy enough to do about the medieval church and Luther, okay, because that was 500 years ago. But I'm also thinking about scale too, and I've wondered about this. Congregations are often very shy about remembering the difficult times or remembering the unfaithful
Mm.
things that kind of had a foothold in the congregation. It just kind of we don't want to do that. We don't want to tell the stories about people who had to be excommunicated or when some aberrant practice got introduced and then had to be rooted out or whatever. Like, we don't want to tell those stories. Instead, it's usually like the history is recounted next to the cookbook, and it's like so I've thought about the incredible value of that, but also the courage it takes to do that, right? To actually tell the story as it happened.
Hmm.
I mean, that's why
Well,
we can't tell the story of Seminex yet, because a lot of those guys are still living. But I think it's a personal. We're so sensitive, but sorry to cut you off, Brady.
no, and you're exactly right. We have two congregations in our district now that left the synod in the 60s, and it was a whole convoluted mess. This was in Giese and Sandstone. And what happened was I went to visit these congregations. Now they're back in the Missouri Synod. And this couple got married on a Saturday and they went on straight to their honeymoon. On Sunday, the pastor basically announced that we're going to start our own commune and we're going to settle in St. Paul, Minnesota. Is it Brothers of Household of Faith, Christ Household of Faith, the name of it?
I remember that in college.
Yep. And so they left, and like 3/4 of the congregation went over to the parsonage, and they figured out how they're going to have a commune first in Mora, and then they went over to St. Paul. And I mean, this is over 50 years ago. And this couple, and then we came back the next Sunday. It was like 1/4 of the church. They were gone, just completely gone. And you could tell that they had not. It was like it was yesterday. And to actually speak about the depth of what had happened that long ago. So yes, congregations are really not very good at letting all that on the table, taking that grief and laying it, one, to the Lord, but two, to one another as God's people, as you try to live together in such ways. And so that was just one of the craziest stories. It took me forever to kind of gather myself after they kept explaining this. But yeah, we hold on to realities from the past. And what do we need? We need God to tell us, I am the God who kicked you out of slavery. I'm the God who, God of Jacob and Isaac and Abraham and so forth, and Joseph, as we hear in this story. So a true story. So we are not very good at accounting the past and what actually was there, but we'll take that 125-year anniversary booklet and make it sound sometimes way different than it actually was.
Well, and I think that there's an interesting hazard in that, because when you avoid documenting, and I'm like, it's really, really hard, but if you avoid documenting the difficult things, that also makes it so that you can't document the good things, right? So if you struggle to point out vices when they are glaring in public, it also makes it so that you can't point out virtue when it's glaring in public. Like, these two things go hand in hand. Wouldn't it be great? I mean, it's hard, but wouldn't it be great if we had, like, here are exemplary, faithful members of the congregation, and here were the instances where, a discipline was warranted because we were, whatever it was. You don't want to do those things in a scandalous, lascivious sort of way. But that's the story of the Old Testament. It's like, here's the corruption, here's the salvation, here are the models of the faith. You have to have all of those components, right?
Yeah, several examples. Sons of Korah, right? Remember Korah's rebellion, and then they turn around and they end up writing a bunch of Psalms. Peter helps Mark write the second gospel, and Peter's shortcomings are apparent in all the gospels, but Peter's not embarrassed to write all that stuff down. he lets Mark let it happen, and he's the George Washington of the early church. Same thing with Paul in the book of Acts. If that was a defense document for Paul, hey, it's all on the table, and that doesn't make us hate Paul even more. It's like, whoa, look at this.
And I'm trying to think of how we go into Eighth Commandment, explain everything in the kindest way in the midst of that as well. So what is the best way to be forthright? Like he said here, you sold me into slavery, cutting you to the heart, while at the same time, trying to put the best construction on everything, explain everything.
I don't know. I wonder if that even, if the Eighth Commandment even applies, right? Because,
I mean, you can't slander.
Okay, so yes, right. But in terms of like the public comment on a thing, because Moses wrote this down about the brothers, and he wasn't like, let me just make sure that I'm putting a qualifying this so that it's not, so it doesn't seem so bad,
Oh,
Right.
He's
oh,
telling us, right?
oh, good. Okay, so Book of Judges tries to do this with one of Moses's descendants, right? Remember
Yes.
they
Oh,
try to
yes.
blot
This is
out
so good.
they blot out his name. The scribes do because they're so embarrassed that this came from
Oh.
Moses's descendant.
Yeah.
But it's clear and obvious who it was because it's written in the margin. I mean that's fascinating.
Hmm.
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 Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it's just I'm thinking more along the lines of like a congregation and how they document what happened in the past, and how do you explain everything in the kindest way about being forthright with what's actually happening, because people can just one of the real struggles that we have in the church. I think this has always been true, but as I definitely see it now from a different level, is that the congregation will look in the past with rose-colored glasses. And so remember how good it was then, but if you were actually taking them back to that, they would be knowing of the burdens that were there then. And then they will take those burdens and then they'll blame someone now because it isn't like it used to be when you were in that, it wasn't actually that great. And so that's something that is very, very, and just very tempting for each of us to do as we live with God's people, is that the past was much better than it is now, and it's your fault that it's not like it used to be. You know?
You've doubtless had occasion to look at through the historical records. Some of the churches have meeting minutes going, way back, and that always struck me how much more forthright things were.
Mm.
Like the Concordia Fairhaven's meeting minutes went back to the 1880s, and one meeting would be, look, we need to get together a cord of wood for the pastor for the winter, and everybody brought their portion, and then the next meeting would be like, so and so refuses to bring his son to confirmation, and so we called a
Wow.
meeting in order to address the issue. Right? It was like,
Mm.
part of it was that it was disimpassioned. It's just like it was just reporting of facts, and that was helpful. But somewhere along the way, uh, it became hard for us to do that.
That's interesting, because that'd be if you look at meeting minutes, rarely would you have anything written down that'd be a spiritual care issue like that. Rarely
Yeah,
nowadays.
correct. Right.
But how important is that? Often that's just put on the pastor. Well, you figure out how
Mhm.
to get that kid to come to confirmation, as opposed to this is all of us who want this child to be instructed in the admonition of the Lord. Wow. Now we have to think about that. We'll start a committee and another acronym.
And
We'll
there it
get it
will go to
going.
die.
Did never happen.
Can't wait.
Oh.
Hey, speaking of cults, this is an aside, but reading a New Yorker article this past weekend, and you remember Shinzo Abe, the Prime Minister of Japan, who was assassinated a few years ago?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Big shocking story in Japan, and it turns out that the guy who assassinated him, he did it because his mother was in the Mooney cult from
Really?
the Korean guy, and they had
Yep.
success in Korea, but most of their financial success came in Japan, and he was so upset about it. And Shinzo Abe's political party had taken a lot of financial donations and was completely tied in with the Moonies, so that's why he decided to go after him. And it was just like cult history is fascinating and dark, and it raises a whole bunch of issues because now Japan has been talking about taking away the Moonies 501c3 status or whatever the equivalent is in Japan. And it's like you've got to determine what objective truth is, right? Because
Mhm.
we're not what's his name, Richard Dawkins, is like, oh well, I'm just going to start a religion where I worship the flying spaghetti monster. And it's like, come on man, that's disingenuous.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, it goes back to, like I mentioned, those congregations that had this group leave. It which is surprising to me. It was always a struggle to get kids to come to confirmation or to have communion more often. How this guy convinced all these people to leave one Sunday, and all of a sudden they have this whole group that meets in St. Paul and still there today. So it's amazing how quickly people can fall into the cult, and what is objective truth that goes beyond the person or the people, but it clings to obviously Christ and who he is.
Yeah, I mean that's that full circle back to your comments about trust, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you gotta run it through you have to test the spirits. Always have to test the spirits. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Hey, Brady, we always like to close with, we call it what's grinding your gears. So what's grinding your gears? You reading anything good or anything like that?
Well, and Pastor Reber and I know this. He knows this about me. I just recently read a 1914 account of American Lutheran history. Jürgen Navy, I think is how his name is. It was written in 1914, and so he's writing about American Lutheran history up till 1914.
Hmm.
And so I was just like enamored by this because you would have all these endings in 1914. So there went some of the mergers that occurred, General Synod and General Council are not together. And for me, I'm very thankful for who we are in the LCMS for being it's about doctrinal integrity, and our unity is in our confession. Because and then we never went through a merger. So that's what's kind of grinding as I try to navigate the council presidents as chair, as obviously as a district president, but also just as a pastor and as a father, trying to navigate what do we cling to throughout all of this. And it's about the confession of faith and clarity of the gospel, more importantly, clarity, not more importantly, but just as important as clarity of our doctrine, because by it we'll save both ourselves and our hearers, as Paul told Timothy.
So was the English district and the Slavic district, which were both synods, were those absorptions rather than mergers? Is that what we call them?
Acquisition.
Okay, I don't know. Acquisitioned? I don't know. Merger? I don't know. I'm not going to answer that because I don't know. Yeah, you might know.
So I'm reading this book. It's called How to Make a Few $1 Billion by this entrepreneur, and I haven't made a few $1 billion yet. I think I'm going to return it to the library.
Has the author made $1 billion?
Yeah. What's
Okay.
his name?
Right.
Is his name Mark Jacobs? He started like 7 companies that have all reached $1 billion valuations. So like no, not Mark Jacobs. That's a fashion company. It's I got to look up his name. Maybe it's Brad. But he started like a United Rentals. And then a waste company that got bought up by Waste Management, and then his most recent venture was XPO, a logistics company. And so it's fun to get into the minds of these entrepreneurs, because they're clearly successful at something, and now the danger is like I can glisten something from that, because he's going to teach me how to think sharper about stuff. But then you gotta go through all the nonsense. But one of the interesting thing was like how to do mergers and acquisitions, M&As as they call it. So I was thinking, how do we apply this to the Missouri Synod? Like, let's just buy the ELS. I don't know what the dollar amount is. Let's just buy them out. I think we can do it. And that's our outreach to the community. What do you think?
Well, I think Pastor Buchs would have a better perspective because he went to an ELCA college or ELS college. I went to ELCA college. You went to ELS, but you went to ELS, so maybe you would have a number in your head of what the cost would be. I don't know. We can call
oh boy,
our ELS friends and see what they say.
I'll put out a few feelers and see what kind of an offer they'd be willing to entertain.
Jay Weber gave me his business card a few years ago,
we should get that father-son duo, Jay Weber and Paul Weber, on their ELS representatives. That'd be kind of fun.
That would be fun.
Were you and Paul college roommates? Is that right?
Yeah, and tennis teammates. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Good. Yeah. I just think like mergers. Let's just buy them. We're the big boy. Let's start flexing our muscle. Okay.
I think because the key thing for us in the LCMS is they came in and kind of abided by our rules whenever someone came into our synod. So like the Finns in 1964, and they came in on our rules, and whether or not that's good or bad or indifferent, but whenever there's a merger, something gets lost. And that is something very, very important. And let me just give you one last thought. So when in 1983, the LCA was looking at merging, and the first vote, they're going through doctrinal statements, and they had like 60 people on this committee. It's ridiculous. Don't have 60 people on a committee. And they were voting literally on the name for God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, or Creator, Redeemer, Sanctifier. And the vote, actually was 63 people. The vote was 33-30 for Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. This is way before ELCA is even formed. And so it's said in the book, this is Edgar Trexler wrote, and he said, feminism has appeared to have entered our church bodies.
The next vote was about what percentage contribution the pension should receive. That was probably the very next vote.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Fun fact: I had our circuit read that book 2 years ago.
No way.
I continue to benefit from that exercise. That was great.
Oh man, yeah, that book I've read it several times just because it's a testament of basically what not to do. What not to do. So
awful binding too. By the way,
it's correct. The books fall apart after 2 seconds. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. No.
Hey, thanks for coming on. This has been a real treat. I really appreciate it.
Same for me, guys. Same for me. Good to see you. Pastor Buchs served in our district for a number of years, so it's good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah.
I hope
you'll consider joining us again. People love hearing people like you read the Bible. So.
Last question. This is yes or no. Can true Lutheranism be practiced outside of the Midwest?
Well, I'm not going to answer that one. Yeah, I would say yes. I would say yes, but I feel like somehow I would get brought into some kind of trap. So I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to stop.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I'm going to hit stop.